Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Michael Stone has traveled to Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. He joins Detective Rich Liebesser to visit the home of one of the most notorious torture criminals, David Parker Ray. Police discover Ray's secret, deviant world after a woman escapes from his home, wearing only a metal collar and a broken chain. When police enter David Parker Ray's home, they discover a room used for extreme bondage and domination. It is just the beginning. Police enter the truck trailer he parks next to his house, a structure he calls the toy box.
We discovered a systematic torture chamber and its associated equipment and video equipment, and many indicators that there were more than one victim involved here, that this was a kind of a progressive behavioral pattern that had been going on for some time.
David Parker Ray had turned a trailer into a laboratory to inflict pain on his human captives, soundproofed to muffle any cries for help. There, he tortures his female victims. A gynecological chair has been rigged with restraints. Above the chair, an elaborate network of handcuffs and chains. A drill is used as a torture device. David Parker Ray plays an audio tape for his victims before their torture begins.
When a victim was brought in, this is the first thing that they would hear.
Are you comfortable right now? I doubt it. Wrists and ankles chained, gagged, probably blindfolded. You are disoriented and scared too, I would imagine. You are obviously here against your will. Totally helpless.
He was carefully intermixing the psychological horror with the physical horror.
David Parker Ray sometimes enlists the help of an accomplice to carry out his complex plans.
You've been snatched and brought here for us to train and use as a sex slave. You sound kind of far out. Well, I suppose it is to the uninitiated, but we do it all the time.
On the wall is a paper that shows how David Parker Ray sees his victims. He calls them packages.
These are diagrams that he drew, that he designed, and he appears to be very proud of them.
This to me is another example of premeditation, and a very unusual kind of premeditation that smacks both of the grandiosity of the man and the diabolical nature of the crime.
The list provides detailed instructions for David Parker Ray's accomplice.
The thing that stuck with me after I saw this was the next portion of this, which says quite simply, don't let her get to you. If she was worth taking, she is worth keeping, and she must be subjected to hypnosis before the woman can be safely released. Never just a chained captive.
The document indicates not only the extent of the premeditation, but also the scope of Ray's deviant acts.
And one thing that crept up often in the investigation was an avoidance of the mentioning of killing or of murder.
Yes.
It was always hypnosis. I'm going to hypnotize you before I let you go. But in the same moment that he's saying that, he'll turn around and say, but if you don't do exactly what it is that I tell you to do, I'll kill you, and I'll bury you in the desert, and I've done it before, and I've never been caught.
When police uncover all the documents from his trailer, they realize that David Parker Ray has spent most of his life planning for these crimes.
He had been fantasizing about sadistic sexual behavior from the time he was about 13 or 14 years old. Mm-hmm. We have documents very meticulously kept and organized that show from a period of about 1955 fantasies along the lines of abduction, sexual torture, and even in some cases murder.
When he was 16.
When he was very, very young. Yeah. David Parker Ray exhibits the characteristics of a true sexual sadist. There would be specific sexual interests as a component of that he would have well-developed techniques to carry out this behavior, and that it was almost all fantasy-driven. It may begin with a fantasy, but eventually that would manifest itself in true life, and that he would eventually act on these fantasies.
Detectives find a total of 4 torture victims of David Parker Ray, but are convinced they represent only a fraction of his crimes. David Parker Ray claimed to have killed 1 victim a year for 40 years. In his home, police find a map. Ray had sketched the outline of a nearby lake, marked with several X's, but areas of the lake are too deep to search.
The State Police dive team, the search and recovery team, came here on 3 separate occasions, searching in those areas. Nothing was ever found. We would be very fortunate after a number of years to find anything more than skeletal remains. And even with a more significant amount of time on top of that, we would be lucky and fortunate to find a tooth.
Because investigators could never find the body of a victim of this suspected serial killer, David Parker Ray was only convicted of 4 counts of kidnapping and criminal penetration. But for these crimes, he was harshly punished, sentenced in 2001 to 224 years in prison. He died of a heart attack a year later. To this day, Detective Rich Libaser is convinced that somewhere near Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, lie the remains of more victims of David Parker Ray. When we come back, Dr. Stone continues to explore the sadistic mind of David Parker Ray.